And so I'm glad.
I apologize for that. There's never a good time.
And I'm glad we could get the band back together, so to speak, for tonight's talk. If you didn't know, Fernanda will be joining us via Zoom. And so Fern, again, I'll be driving, so just say next when you're ready to advance the slide, okay? So I'm going to start off reading your bio. All right. Fernanda Gaspar is an emerging craftsperson. Her objects are often attached to a story, emerging you as a narrative and exposing you to the attached piece. Born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, she now resides in San Diego, California, where she enjoys that it is so close to the border town Tijuana and the many cultures that come together and the art they bring with them. Gaspar received her bachelor's degree from San Diego State University in business administration alongside a minor in jewelry and metalwork. She's very passionate about community, often employed by organizations that care for the people, such as the Mingay International Museum and the San Diego Jewelry Academy. Her work has been exhibited nationally, and she's received individual artist awards, such as the Haystack Fellowship Award by the Arlene Fish and David T. Camberg Award at San Diego State University, and the Taboo Excellence in Jewelry Award. So Fern, we're so glad to see you again, and take it away.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Fernanda, and I was the Metal Studio artist in residence there. And it's really an honor to be here and be able to share with you about my work. And so let me tell you a little bit about me and my background. So next. Next.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So I'm originally from Guadalajara, Mexico, and I moved to the US when I was 14. Next. Growing up in Mexico, I was around a lot of beautiful traditional architecture and art, and a lot of decors and embellishments decorated my home and the places I grew up around. I think this informs a lot of like my path today and why I do art. Next. Go to the next one. That's some of the artwork and decor in the homes. Despite this, I went to university to pursue a bachelor's in business administration, but art still found its way to find me. And given an extra spot in my class schedule, I took a crafts course next. I decided to take this crafts course because it taught a lot of craft techniques and I felt connected with working with my hands again. This class formed the path to me working with beads again and wanting to do this during the pandemic where I had a lot of time. You can go to the next slide. So I began making a lot of jewelry with beads. I taught myself a lot from YouTube and took local classes at a little beading store here in San Diego. You can go to the next one. And that led me into meeting people at San Diego State that convinced me to pursue jewelry making as a minor. And that way I found all of these amazing, beautiful people where I found community and I felt like I belonged and where I could really make art again and connect with it, leaving community college and that crafts class. And so I convinced my counselor to let me do a minor. So that's why I still pursued my business degree. You can go to the next slide. So I graduated, this was around this time last year. And right around graduation, I was planning my end of college exhibition, and I wanted to apply to something else, something where I could go somewhere else and keep pursuing art since I felt like a lot of my business degree took away from that art time. And you can go to the next slide. I applied to the residency at Picosin, and I got a no at first, but I still showed my face to the summer session I had gotten a scholarship for. And I guess being there and getting to know, or Picosin getting to know me, led them to offer me an interview. And after the interview, I got a yes. So then again, you can go to the next slide. I was met by a beautiful community there, along with Lily and Riley. You can go to the next slide, where we made so many good memories. And this was a huge part of it for me, just having this community and all of the things I took from it. But I know you want to hear a little bit about the work I'd made, so I'll tell you in the next slide about my work. But a big part was the people. So because of that, I started this tradition where I make monthly collages. I really wanted to get better at using the Adobe Suite. And so Photoshop and Illustrator for some of the laser stuff, but Photoshop for some of these collages. And I feel like this really is a celebration of the people and the memories that I get to have month to month. So I like to post these on my Instagram, and as well as I send them out as a email monthly. So if you are interested in that, please check out my links. You can go to the next slide. And at the beginning of the residency, I worked on that, or started working on the collages, but I also needed to make a um, pieces for this gallery that I got awarded a spot in the gallery so I could sell my work. So I began mixing my beading with some of the metalworking, following all the ideas I had in college. You can go to the next slide. So I made a whole collection and sent it out to be sold at this gallery. And that was really a lot of fun because I had never done anything like this. Everything I had made before was non-wearables. It was mainly art pieces and conceptual pieces. So it's really fun to sit down and try to make a collection of things that could be worn day to day. You could go to the next slide. I also wanted to start exploring with copper welding. I had learned this technique in school, and I also explored steel welding when I was at Haystack in 2023. And so I know that when you weld copper, you're able to put them in the kiln so that they could be enameled. So that's something that really excited me and that I really wanted to explore. So I began welding all of these little jump rings together. You can go to the next slide. And I formed them into these circles that could later hold some flowers. And I also just used the scrap ones to make some jewelry. You can go to the next slide. So I made these flower frog vases in collaboration with Riley. He made the vases and I made the frogs, where they allow you to separate all of the flowers so that you can arrange it better. And this was really special because I asked Sandy, a local flower enthusiast, that she's in the audience right now, to help me arrange these and beautify them so one, I could put them to use, and two, so that I could photograph them and actually see if they worked in the way I wanted them to. So we gave one away for the auction, and the other two are still in the gallery if you would like to see them in person. You can go to the next slide. I obviously had to go back to jewelry, so I used some of the scraps and the leftovers to make these bangles. And that was really fun, just to explore what I could do with the material and the technique. And it was kind of a struggle at first to get the enamel to stick, but it was worth it at the end. I love looking at these pieces, and it's just the beginning for me. I still want to explore more of what I can do with welding and enameling. You can go to the next slide. So as you can see, what I've shown you now is a lot of like looking at technique and seeing what I can do. And there's a lot of thinking when I'm working with just the technique and I'm not really thinking about a concept. And I like to think about why I'm doing the things I'm doing and does it connect to me? And that's why a lot of my work has a lot of storytelling in it. You can go to the next slide. So in my website, if you look through, I've started adding images of my work, of more of my conceptual pieces that tell you a story. And it's called Let Me Tell You a Story. Because some of my conceptual pieces have these like narratives tied into them, where I'm trying to see if I can be a good writer and just take myself a little more seriously. English being my second language has kind of been a struggle to say that I can write and that I can do and then I can sit down and write an essay about it or something. But I've been trying to take that more seriously, and now that I have time, I've written a lot of things so that they can go along with my work. So if you want to check that out, please check it out. You can go to the next slide. So some of the things that I did in some of the pieces I worked on at Picosin was this bangle where I used that same idea of the circles that I was welding, but instead of welding them, I was just soldering them. But I learned a lot of that technique that was like heating it enough for it to join, but not enough that it would melt or lose its shape. So I did a lot of that with these figures in this bangle. And this was a place-specific bracelet that it fits exactly with that tattoo that I got later in the residency. And you can go to the next slide. So this tells the story about being in Mexico and the fences that would be around my house and the gates. So to the right, you can see the entrance, which you still have other two doors you have to get through in order to get to the inside. So a lot of the times my grandma would be like, oh my God, run to see who's outside, and so I would often have to peek out to see who was outside. And to the left, you see the image of our patio that on top has this big cage structure that we would joke around that it felt like it was a cage, but it was never a bad one or anything. It was just this different experience you'd get being inside of the house. And sorry. So you can go to the next slide. Then following the same cage idea, I worked on this piece that is called Kiss in a Cage, which I felt like a lot of the times I've talked about this cage or this fence-like structure because of being like protecting myself from the outside world. It felt like I wanted to be inside of this bubble and cautiously watch from the inside what was happening on the outside. And that's kind of hard to do when you're in a relationship, but that's what I felt like I was doing a lot of the times, being behind this cage, not letting the kiss happen, not letting myself get into a relationship fully. So I wanted to talk about that in this piece. You can go to the next slide. And as you can see, this is a flat piece of these wires that are then shaped into the shape of my lips. And it attaches onto the nose like your nose ring. You can go to the next slide. Playing off of that other piece, sometimes I feel like I take myself too seriously and I want to make a joke of it. So I made this necklace and these keys that I started selling them. And again, I felt like I wanted to bring them back to the body and back to more wearables. And I made this key that was the key to my heart. So that it'd be a way to get back inside, a way to break out of that bubble, out of that gate. You can go to the next slide. I also made these bolo ties for a friend, and I don't just like to focus on stories about myself. I like to tell stories about other people, and he had a group of friends and they found a bunch of rats in their house, and that bonded them over college. And all three of them had gotten these little rat tattoos, and then they were going to a wedding. So they wanted to wear the tattoo out in the world. And I made these little bolo ties that had the rats on them. You can go to the next slide. So now that I've told you about a little bit about my storytelling, I'm going to tell you more of the teaching and the community that I experienced at Picosin. You can go to the next slide. So I got to teach some of the highlights. I'm not telling you everything, but some of the highlights where I taught this cabochon ring making class, where I got to explore more of my Adobe skills by making this scene where I showed the step-by-steps. This was actually right before I left, and I remember being like, oh, I'm going to be leaving soon, and I need something that will remind them of me, but also of the class and the opportunities to take classes at Picosin. And I just thinking back, I'm like, that's kind of funny because I did leave pretty soon after that. So I'm just happy that that's still there and it's present. And I think doing those little extra things helped me take myself more seriously as like a new instructor and as an emerging instructor. You can go to the next slide. I also got to use more of my skills in like that flyer where we had this studio sampler for ornament making during Christmas, and there are some of the pictures from class. I also used some of the illustrator skills to make templates so that they could do that little bear in that little ornament, and they could enamel like more exact shapes onto the ornaments. You can go to the next slide. One of the last things I did, I noticed that in the community, there was no more recycling. And we drank a lot of seltzer waters at Pocosin. And I wanted to utilize and recycle the aluminum cans. So I came up with a series of projects that I didn't get to teach to the kids, but I'm hoping that one day they'll make it out of the toolbox. And it was really fun planning them and getting to work through the beginning of the idea to the end and thinking about how am I going to teach this to a group of kids. You can go to the next slide. I also made these little frames as a way to just have like a more simple exercise in the last winter residency. And I wanted people to leave something behind at Pocosin, a little picture of themselves that could remind you of who has been there. And if you go around the stairs, if they're still there, I would encourage you to go look at them. But those are the people that attended there for the winter residency, and it was a good memory and a good little exercise, something not too serious from all the serious work we sometimes do in the studio. You can go to the next slide. I also taught the high school classes, and they got to make these nameplate necklaces, and that was super fun to see the kids express themselves and make something that really belonged to them, which is what jewelry is at the end of the day, and that it represents you. You can go to the next slide. So that was then, and what am I doing now? Now, as you guys might not know or know, I got into a car accident back in North Carolina, but so I had to come back to San Diego. So now you can go to the next slide. I've been just healing and taking my time and beading. I have a lot of time to sit down and bead. So I've been continuing this series that I also worked on at Pocosin, which is just more on cigarettes that go back to the beginning of my work, the cigarette shape. And now I've been experimenting with making them into these cigarette earrings. You can go to the next slide. I've also been hanging out a lot with Polo, my dog, and my siblings, and just hanging out and spending time with them, creating new memories so that hopefully more conceptual work comes later. And you can go to the next slide. And I've also been getting ready now that I'm back in San Diego. I'm really excited to be back in a border town and thinking back of what goes around here. And I've made some work on the border and being there and seeing what's happening out here. And I got invited to be in this exhibition. So I've been pulling out all the work and just polishing it up so that we can share and have that exhibition here. So I'm excited for that. You can go to the next slide. Oh, you can go click again. That's another piece. So thank you so much for being here and for listening to my little artist talk. And I'm so excited to hear about Lily and Riley. And you can go to the next slide. If you want to find me, here's a little link tree of all my links of my Instagram, my website, and my newsletter if you're interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fern. All right, I'd like to introduce our next artist in residence. Riley McManus is a multidisciplinary artist whose practice uses clay to capture the intricate patterns found in both the natural landscape and human-altered environments. His work embraces diverse materials, incorporating metal, cement, and found wood to explore humanity's complex relationship with the natural world. His artistic journey first began on the shores of Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin. There, the iron-stained clay crumbles into the waves, revealing a lost history of ancient fossils and unique rock formations. Wow, that's quite, oh, I thought you were right there. Quite beautiful. It was here Riley first experienced the transformative potential of clay, discovering its malleable nature and possibilities it held for creation. He earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts from UW-Madison in 2020 and served as an artist in residence at the Iowa Ceramic Center and Glass Studio for 2 years before joining Pocosin Arts. He's excited to continue his exploration of place and how art can foster meaningful connections within communities. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Riley. I am from northern Wisconsin. I grew up in a very rural area, pretty similar to this one. And I discovered ceramics again on Lake Superior, and I later took classes for it in middle school and high school. I had a great ceramics teacher who took the time to show me how to throw on the wheel. So I left high school with that skill. I was okay at throwing at that point, but I went to the local 2-year school. And there I wanted to study environmental science. I've always loved being outdoors, and I've just found a lot of wonder by going outside and seeing how different systems work together. While I was there, I took a painting and drawing class, and that kind of got me back into art. Unfortunately, the school was small enough that they didn't have any 3D studios, so it was pretty much just drawing and painting. But that rekindled my love for it. And at the same time, I was taking science classes that had a lot more math than I thought they would. So that kind of deterred me, and I chose to pursue something I was passionate about. So I got my associate's degree and I transferred to UW-Madison. I was really drawn to their art program because of all the mediums that they offered. So I really took this time to kind of branch out. I did a lot of metalworking, including making a functioning lock. I also did glass and enameling. But ultimately I came back to ceramic. And I really learned how to throw big and throw fast. So there's my first show. I threw a series of bowls and discs that hung on the wall. And from there, I knew I wanted to keep working on the wheel. And so I started throwing these forms and then altering them after. I also wanted to make more narrative work. So I was creating a story for all of these characters and incorporating metal and glass in my work. So these were all thrown on the wheel, and then their faces and hands were added. So trying to get back to that interest in the environment and sticking with narrative, I created this body of work. It was just large insects, and I still wanted to use the wheel, so a lot of them have wheel thrown components. And I started doing this texture where I would just throw a big cylinder that had heavy throw lines. So as your hands move up the cylinder, sometimes your knuckles or fingers can leave lines. So I was emphasizing that and cutting those cylinders and then reconstructing them. So I would throw a cylinder, cut it into a slab, and then reassemble it. So these are some works that show that texture from being originally thrown on the wheel. And at that time, I was in my last year at school and COVID hit. So that last vase I did back at my parents' house. From there, once I had my degree, I started my residency at the Iowa Ceramic Center and Glass Studio. And I wanted to start making more figurative work, but still using that textured slab to build them up. So this piece shows kind of the different stages of starting, but you can still see that wheel thrown texture, and that was really important to me. I started playing around with the body shape, adding panels and taking them away, to kind of make a more interesting design, but still, again, the wheel texture really comes through, almost like corrugated metal. And I've always been really interested in experimenting with different materials. So the Iowa Ceramic Center was in this really old building, but it had a bunch of little shops in it. And the one right next to us was a crystal shop. So I would go over there, buy crystals, bring them back to my studio, crush them up in a little mortar and pestle, and then fire them. And I wanted to see what that looked like, seeing how different materials reacted at different temperatures. And I was also experimenting with pressing different things into my clay to get these really rough organic textures. I wanted to make something that could almost look like you just found it in nature. So I started doing a lot of carving to get that rock formation look, and I was doing soda firing, which lent itself nicely to the textures I was creating. I also started mixing up all of my clay bodies. So I had porcelain with stoneware, and to my surprise, it didn't explode like I was always told it would. It was fine. So these pieces I was a little bit more intentional with. I was still getting that rough carved rocky surface, but I was adding the slabs back into it, just kind of trying to create something really organic with something more geometric. There's a close-up, and that had some of the crushed rocks from the crystal shop next door, and it created orange flashing, which was really cool. And from there, I did this show. I created the largest piece, which is on the left. It probably came up to right here on my chest, right here. And it took up the whole kiln. So I wanted to push it to the max. And I also was working with glass at that point. I was teaching fused glass. And so I made a glass sphere that fit in there perfectly. And I did a bunch of hanging planters with that rocky texture. I'm a big lover of plants, and those were all growing in my tiny little apartment, but I brought them out and I sold them. So they went to new homes. So there is a close-up of some of those textures. So in between the Iowa Ceramic Center and my time here, I did a show in Cincinnati. And for that one, I did go back to more figurative work, but I was still, again, really focused on that wheel throne texture. And then I came here. So coming here, I had this plan of working with a self-glazing clay body. And that was interesting, but then I saw the boardwalk and I was like, I'm gonna make all my art about this. So the boardwalk has this really great texture. It's this really organic, worn wood, and I wanted to emulate that in my work, but carving that would take a long time. So I had the idea of just pressing some clay into it. And the texture I got was really exciting and really what I was looking for to work with. I also spent this time working in the wood studio and getting acquainted with that. I had never had access to a nice wood studio before, so that was an exciting avenue. So using that slab to press into the clay or into the boardwalk, I could get that nice texture from it. And then I discovered I could take textures of all sorts of things. So this is me with a tree I really liked at Pettigrew State Park. And I really liked this pattern. So I pressed clay into it and got that texture. And then I brought it back and fired it in the studio. So once I have fired it, it is bisque. So it's a bisque slab, and I can just go ahead and press clay back into that, peel it off, and have that texture. So not only was it not as labor intensive as carving, but it was getting a very accurate texture of the object I was taking a mold of. So instead of like replicating, it was actually from that texture. So from that, I started making functional wear, and I had to depart from the wheel, which was something that was really hard for me because I had built up a lot of skills, and all before all my work was related back to the wheel. But in order to work with these bisque molds, I had to really go away from that. And I've been having a really great time working with the slabs in that way. I was also fortunate to take a workshop with the amazing Eric Burris, who does Mokame Gane, a metal smithing technique. So that is where you layer copper and silver. I think this one was 14 layers, and then you carve through it and roll it flat again. So Mokame Gane translate to wood grain pattern in Japanese. That's where the technique comes from. And I really liked this wood grain look. I thought it would go nicely with the wood textures I was also taking at the time. And I thought this would be a great method to transfer into clay, and it transferred pretty easily. So I was excited about that. And I made some pieces using that Mokame Gane texture. Then I wanted to figure out how to combine that with the wood texture. So the Mokame pattern and the wood texture. And this is one of the vases that I made. And during one of our critiques, it was mentioned that it looked like a stone setting. So almost like the wood was a stone and then the Mokame Gane was bezel setting it. And that was really interesting to me. I also had the opportunity to make some vases for the Chamber of Commerce's banquet dinner. This was a great time to try to incorporating the Mokame pattern with the texture that I took from the boardwalk and from a water meter sign that was by the boardwalk. So the third one in, I combined the Mokame pattern in a wood texture, and I thought that was really successful, and I liked that. But going back, I was thinking about that bezel setting, and since at Picosin we have access to ceramics, metals, and wood, I decided it was time to make some jewelry. So this is a piece of driftwood that I found in the Albemarle Sound. And it's about 2 to 3 inches long, so it's not super small. But it's special. Sometimes you just find a piece of wood and you're like, this is it. This one's got it. And this piece of driftwood definitely had it. I'm thinking, working with driftwood, I'm thinking about what was this before it was worn away to just a small piece. Like what is it the vestige of? Was it a giant tree? Was it a branch? Is this the only thing that remains of something that was once living? And I also wanted to explore alternative stone setting methods. So this piece has rose quartz, which is about a ½ an inch, set into the wood itself. So I didn't want to use glue or epoxy. I wanted the wood to actually be holding it, no metal. So by using steam, I was able to do that, and it's firmly in there, and then it has a copper backing. I've also been working with this special kind of wood I found. Walking the sound, I found this gnarly, bulbous driftwood that I couldn't figure out what it is, but it's actually smilax root, which grows a really thorny vine. But I found the wood itself to be very beautiful. And so I did the steam stone setting, and I actually used the Mokame Gane sheet metal that I made in that workshop. So I have the wood grain metal with actual wood. And then recently I heard this quote, Picosin Art's first mission statement, connecting people to place and connecting culture to the environment through the arts. And I think that that's really a great summary for the work that I've made during my time here at Picosin. From the first day when I was out there on the boardwalk and people were approaching me, asking me what I was doing, and it was sparking all these great conversations about art and ceramics they had done in Poquoson itself. This is such an amazing community. And it's been an honor to get to know everyone here. And moving forward, I'm still going to keep this place in my heart. And in my art, I will be working with communities, places, and then trying to connect the environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Lily. All right, last but not least, we have girl on the left. No, just kidding. It's a joke. Lily Tilton is a woodworker and craftsperson from Boston, Massachusetts. She graduated from the 2-year cabinet and furniture making program at North Bennett Street School in January 2023 and returned as a teaching assistant for the 2023-24 school year. She's held a fellowship at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport, Maine, and has worked for several Boston area furniture makers before coming to Poquoson. Her work has been featured in Fine Woodworking magazine and was a finalist in the International Society of Furniture Designers 2023 Innovation and Design Awards. She also has a degree in economics and psychology from Colby College and previously worked in the tech industry for 7 years. So let's all give Lily a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna set a timer because otherwise I will just keep on yapping, so. Yeah, just do that quickly. Okay, hi, everyone. As Gretchen said, I am the 9-month wood resident here at Poquoson Arts. My name is Lily Tilton, but I go under the moniker Geneva for my furniture, which just happens to be my middle name. Should we admit this person to the waiting room?
We're supposed to have someone who's on that.
Peepaw, let's go. Yeah, what?
No, I didn't close it. I just collapsed.
Okay, so everyone's still on then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So to be, there you go.
Yeah.
To begin with, so here's a photo of me in my dad's wood shop when I was around 4 or 5 years old. My dad is retired now, but he was a wood shop teacher for a very long time at an elementary school right outside of Boston. My grandfather was also a self-taught woodworker. So growing up, I have a lot of really fond memories of spending time in the wood shop and just hanging out with my family there. And so it's always been a really warm and safe and special place for me. That being said, I had never really thought about going into woodworking myself growing up. It was just kind of a fun hobby for me, but I'd never expected to have a career in it. And I, really didn't have a lot of art background whatsoever. I mean, I took art in elementary school, but didn't take any high school classes, didn't do any art classes in college beyond my required credit. And so, yeah, art was definitely something that was far removed. I kind of grew up with this more emphasis on academics, getting good grades and going to a good college and getting a good job. And so that was kind of my expected career path. Even though I didn't really know what I wanted to do, I just was like, I'll just go to college and figure it out there. So I ended up going to a 4-year college where I majored in economics and psychology, mainly because I liked the subjects and I figured that they could be practical for getting a job after I graduated. And I accepted the first job offer that I received after college and ended up in the exciting world of advertising technology. So I ended up working in ad tech for almost 7 years. Parts of it were interesting and I met some really cool people that I'm still friends with today, but it was just kind of a job, a means to pay my bills. It wasn't really anything that I was super passionate about or excited about. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, I definitely, like many other people, I was kind of starting to do some soul searching about, is this really what I want to be doing with the majority of my time? Like, I'm not really getting any deeper value out of this. It's just, what I do all day. And, it's also something that you're kind of just sitting at a screen, for 10 to 12 hours a day. It was a very demanding job. And you're just kind of working on something that's on a computer screen. You're never physically touching it or seeing it. And I mean, I was literally making software so that marketers could buy targeted ads for their, bottom line. So it was like very soulless work, I would say. And especially during the pandemic when, a lot of really crazy things were happening and we were all kind of in this very uncertain place. I was like, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I'm really not into the corporate lifestyle. This is not for me. And so I decided to pivot and I went back to school for woodworking because that, like I mentioned, had really been this source of warmth and comfort for me. And it was something that I always enjoyed doing. And I figured, if work is what we spend the majority of our lives doing, I want it to be something that I actually do, get some value out of. So I went back to North Bennett Street School in Boston. I enrolled in their 2-year cabinet and furniture making program. And it was a school program that kind of emphasized traditional furniture making, joinery, and techniques from the 17th to 19th century. So the big emphasis on hand skills. And so for this, it felt kind of like a rejection of this previous like corporate drone lifestyle because I'm really, I'm getting my hands dirty. I'm making things physically. I'm really kind of connecting with the material that I'm using. So I instantly felt this connection and this sense of validation that this was kind of the right decision for me and this was really where I belonged. And once I finished, just kind of talking more about some of the work that I did. So starting with some of my student work, there we go. So you can see a lot of nature motifs in my work. Kind of like Riley, I find a lot of value in the natural world. I have a lot of appreciation for the forms within it. And especially because wood is a natural material and it's just really fascinating material for me. It kind of has a mind of its own. It moves and breathes, even though its connection to being a living creature has been severed. It can disagree with you when you're trying to do certain things with it. It really kind of has its own personality and temperament. And it also has a very natural beauty to it. So I really wanted to emphasize that, starting with some of my earlier work here. I also was kind of inspired by the arts and crafts movement, which was a movement that was kind of a direct response to the Industrial Revolution. So kind of a rejection of this era of mass production of cheaply and poorly made goods, and kind of an emphasis on a return to craftsmanship and, simple, clean aesthetic lines, natural forms. So this obviously resonated with me based on kind of what I've just been saying about, my own personal rejection of like corporate automation and things like that. And so this piece here was kind of inspired by some work of artists within the arts and crafts movement. Particularly, there's these two architects, Green and Green. They were brothers who had an architecture firm and they also made furniture as well. And I just really admire a lot of their aesthetics of the work that they did. And so I was trying to emulate some of that work in this piece as well. I also found that I really enjoyed making chairs. I think that chairs are obviously they're a really functional object, you build them to sit in them, but they're also very expressive as well. I mean, these are two chairs that I made and they're vastly different in terms of the techniques that were used to build them and the styles and types of wood that were used, and even just kind of the socioeconomic implications of them. On the right is a Windsor chair, which is kind of your quintessential American colonial chair. These were considered farmer chairs. because basically anyone with a few hand tools could make them. So, you know, you take a green log and you split it down into pieces of wood and you can shape it with a few hand tools. And then on the left here, this is my version of a chair, but it's modeled after a Queen Anne chair, which was this very elaborate hand-carved type of furniture from the 18th and 19th century that most people would not be able to afford and to access. It was really just the upper class that kind of had this kind of chair. And I think that these disparate styles really tell a really interesting story. And for me, just kind of learning about the different styles that exist out there and then being able to recreate them, but with my own twist on them, has been really a fascinating part of my experience and my journey as an artist. After I graduated from North Bennett, I actually was taking some time to kind of figure out what I wanted to do next. And I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to take a 2-week workshop up at Haystack that summer. And so this was actually the first thing that I built after I graduated that wasn't, you know, just a commission piece. So this is the first thing I just made just for fun while I was at Haystack. And it was really kind of an eye-opening experience for me to have gotten my education in woodworking at this very traditional school where you're learning how things were done during this time and kind of emulating it versus going to a different craft school and kind of learning how they might teach something, they might do something, and meeting a lot of different wood artists that do things in a very different way, and kind of having that convergence of different ideas was really inspiring for me, and also just kind of gave me a new creative outlet. And so for this piece, I wanted to take something that was kind of along the lines of this like very traditional furniture making technique. So here I used hand cut dovetails on the side of the purse. And I wanted to apply these techniques to something that was wholly non-traditional and not just a piece of furniture. So that's kind of why I chose a handbag. It was really kind of meant to be a very unserious item, especially because if you know any older woodworkers, they are very, very serious about their hand-cut dovetails. There is one way to do it, and if you don't do it that way, you're doing it wrong. So that's kind of why I wanted to play around with that idea and kind of turn it on its head by applying it to such kind of a frivolous object such as a handbag. This was actually the first piece that I finished here at Pocosin. Funnily enough, I started it in the summer of 2023 as well. So I got a fellowship up at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship up in Maine for around 3 weeks. And when I went into it, I kind of had a vague idea of this design that I wanted to do. I really liked the style and the silhouettes of those fainting couches, or like the Victorian, like Greek revival couches where, you know, one end is up and one end is down. I just really like that shape. And I kind of had a vague idea that I wanted to build something like that. And then while I was at CFC, I happened to overlap with 2 artists that were both really renowned at steam bending wood. And steam bending is something that I hadn't really had a lot of experience doing. So I obviously leapt at that opportunity and really kind of picked their brains and cornered them for 2 or 3 weeks and kind of made them show me everything that they knew and teach me everything they knew. And so I had the opportunity to do some steam bending to make this piece. So the entire S shape of the chair is 9 different pieces of ash steam bent and then laminated together. And that process was an incredibly I'd say stressful and kind of all hands on deck process. So each individual piece was around 8 feet long and 2 inches thick, or 2 inches square thick. And so you soaked the piece of wood overnight, and then you put it in this steam box for at least 3 hours, but sometimes it ended up being more like 5 because it had to be at a kind of constant temperature. And then you had to take it out of the steam box and run across to another building and have 4 other people kind of help strap it down with these metal straps, and there's multiple people clamping things on, and it's this huge process. It was a very collaborative effort because you needed all these people helping out. But it was really a very enjoyable and eye-opening experience as well. And I definitely got a lot out of it. And I left CFC having been able to bend all 9 pieces, but I wasn't able to finish the piece in that 3-week period. So that's why I ended up finishing at Poquoson later on. But this was just a really cool experience overall. And it kind of showed me that the end result of the piece isn't necessarily the full story, because obviously when I'm building this piece and I'm steam bending this piece and all the work that goes into it, it's actually kind of a really physical process. The wood, like I mentioned, there's 4 people that are putting a lot of force onto it to put it into these molds. There's a lot of clamps involved. The wood is undergoing immense pressure and it can really snap and break, and there's a lot of tearage that happens. And so it was just very interesting seeing that kind of contrast between this very almost violent transformation that the wood is going through versus this very slender, like delicate looking piece that I ended up with. And, looking at the piece, you don't know that kind of backstory. So for me, that's kind of an interesting part of the process and an interesting side of the work that I do, is the hidden story that goes into it and the work that goes into it as well. This is another piece that I made at Poquoson. It started out just me needing a bedside table for my bedroom here. So I just in general wanted to make a table, but I really just wanted to have fun with it as well. And a lot of my work thus far has been about, square joinery and doing things like very precisely, getting those 90 degrees right. And so for this, I wanted to really just do something that wasn't really square whatsoever. So the top is, just a very abstract blob squiggle shape. And then the base, I wanted to get some more turning experience. Turning is something that I learned at North Bennett, and I have some basic level of skills, but it's always been kind of a source of anxiety for me. And so I have been forcing myself more and more to incorporate turning into my work, just so I can get better at it and kind of overcome that fear of it. And so this was just kind of one of the first times I was able to get like really clean beads and coves on my actual piece itself. And if anyone here has turned, they can speak to the agony of having something perfectly turned, and then the tool skips and you have this huge gouge in your piece and you just have to start over because it's ruined. And so I was just really proud of the fact that I was able to kind of pull this off after many, many years of struggling and dealing with that anxiety. This is a piece that I finished more recently. I'm just gonna do a time check. Oh yeah, okay. So 3 minutes left. So after I made that first purse, I knew that I wanted to make more. And this is one that kind of had been percolating in the back of my mind for a while. I had a classmate at North Bennett make kind of a rude comment about like me breaking a nail or something in the wood shop. And so I'd had this like idea of doing something with nails in a purse for a long time. And I was lucky enough when I came to Poquoson, they have this amazing metal studio, and Fern was kind enough to show me how to do some welding with the oxyacetylene torch. And so this was kind of my first experience with welding, but I was able to take a bunch of just standard issue construction nails and practice welding them together and kind of bending them and mutilating them and putting them into these abstract and weird shapes to form the chain of this purse, and then the decoration across the front as well, and some other embellishments. I also used a technique of charring the ash of the purse. So I initially was just going to dye it black like I had done with my lounge chair, but then I decided to actually char the wood with a blowtorch. This is kind of a technique that's been used in Japan, typically with cedar, but they will take wood and char it to kind of remove the softer elements of the wood and make it stronger and more resistant to rot and insect damage. And that kind of tied in with the whole idea of this purse being kind of like harder and, you know, edgier and having this kind of tough protective outside. Let's see. So this is just a few other additional items that I've made during my time at Picosin. I've got the opportunity to collaborate with Riley, which was really fun. We made this jar with a turned lid at the bottom here. So that was really fun. Just been playing around with some fun animal toaster tongs. That's been a fun project that I've been doing with the kids as well. And then finally, been getting back into doing some more marquetry. I had done it by hand in the past, but at Picosin we have a laser printer, and that has obviously been a huge time saver for doing marquetry versus doing it by hand. So I've been playing around with that. And then also just doing some more carving as well. Since I haven't really had much opportunity to do it since I was at North Bennett. So that's been a fun way to kind of get back to those hands tool roots and practice that skill set some more. And yeah, I think that is it. Just under the wire.
Go ahead and stop share here. And I guess I just wanted to take a few moments with the in real life audience and the virtual audience and see if you all had any questions for any of the artists.
Hey, over on the virtual, I have a question. Celine from DC, thank you guys so much for a wonderful talk. It's really cool to see all of your work and what you've made in the last few months. My question is regarding to your guys' collaboration. You guys spoke about how you each other are like sharing knowledge, working with each other on making specific things. My question is, how have the other two artists in your cohort influenced the way you think about your work? And this is for any of the three of you.
I can say something. I feel like being with them made me think a lot about the techniques we used. We actually got to a point where we joked around and we were like, we're contemporary artists using contemporary materials. And that's what drove us to kind of stray away from the things that we think back on. Like, for me, it was like, I have to make jewelry. I have to make jewelry. And I'm like, okay, no, I can step away and explore other things too, which was how they influence me for sure.
I've been given a lot of help in the wood shop because I don't necessarily know what I'm doing all the time, but just having Lily's been great, super willing to help me out and make my ideas come to fruition, as well as the assistant directors. So if I feel like if we ever have a question or you want to try something in a different medium, everyone has been super helpful with helping us achieve that.
Yeah, and I think just having the opportunity to go into the other workshops during the day, just like pop in and see what you guys are working on. And just step away from our own work for a second and just see what's going on and see like all the different possibilities that there are, because I don't really have a background in ceramics or metals whatsoever. So just kind of seeing the possibilities that there are and being inspired by that has been really huge.
Awesome. Can I ask a follow-up question? Is there anything that you feel is more prominent or standing out in this collaboration, the way you're thinking?
I think you can see with both of our or the three of us, like our collaborations with Riley. You can kind of see how at first we were kind of like, okay, you do the ceramic part and I'll do my part that I know how to do. And I feel like now with the newer stuff we're making, it might be more like we're experimenting on each other's studios. So I feel like we've stepped out of our comfort zones.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely, like, I had to go back to the metal studio a lot when I was welding those nails together, and Fern was like so patient and helpful when kind of getting me my foot in the door. And so I think just having that ability to lean on each other and share that knowledge, when instead of just being like, hey Fern, can you do this for me? Like, her showing me how to do it so I could do it myself was really a valuable experience.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to work with wood anymore. Thanks, Lily.
Any other questions from the group or the virtual group? All right, well, thank you guys so much. It's been really educational, and thank you all for coming. I'm sure these kiddos will stick around for another minute or so afterwards if y'all have any other questions or want to talk about anything with them. But thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you say it underneath Fern so that we can get a picture of the group?